yourself. Great. And then make sure that you have those connections, be able to ask questions, not only for you guys to foster relationships with the industry, but for the industry to foster relationships with you. We think that UNT has some of the best and brightest available for the journalism community, the advertising, public relations, broadcast journalism, newspaper reporting, all of that. And we want to make sure that both sides know each other and are well connected. So that's really what we're doing. That's what this event is about, introducing you to some of the folks in the field that are actually doing this, so you can ask and answer questions. And so that's what we're going to do today. And that's why we have Eric Gay here today to talk to you guys about photojournalism. Take it away.
Cool. All right, thank you, Trent. All right, Eric is a good friend. He's visited us many times. He's participated in some workshops with us, in fact, including one all-day workshop, which we're really grateful for, and we owe you a huge debt of gratitude for that still, Eric. Thank you very much. He's a staff photographer for the Associated Press. He's based in San Antonio, Texas. He was born in Lubbock, and he graduated from UNT in 1990. Before joining the Associated Press in Dallas, Eric worked at the Dallas Times-Herald and at the Denton Record-Chronicle right there in Denton. His assignments range from news to sports to business, features, and politics. Right now, at this very moment, he's outside of a baseball ballpark because he has to cover Major League Baseball immediately after this event. Eric's primary area of coverage is Austin, Texas, and he ranges to the Texas border and Houston, but he's not restricted to those borders. He ranges all over the place. So he has an enormous amount of experience, and we're really lucky to have him here and talk about how he got to where he is now and sort of how the industry's changed in the time that he's been in, and what kind of things that people coming into the industry can expect. So thank you so much, Eric, for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thanks for having me. I guess I'm not sure exactly where you want to go with this, but you know, the business has changed a lot since I left North Texas. It used to be, you know, if you knew your camera and could follow focus and you were pretty aggressive, you know, you could get a job. There was a lot of jobs out there to be had for photographers, and it's you know, as we've all seen, not just for photographers but writers, you know, the whole gamut of journalists. It seems to be a shrinking field in a lot of ways, although there's more media out there than there's probably ever been because of social media. So it's an interesting time. I've seen a lot of really good photographers out of jobs, and you just have to keep bringing a different skill set to the table with the technology, with cameras. You know, it's more your know-how to be in place to take a picture than knowing sometimes actually how to take a picture. A lot of reporters are using their own phones to take photos that have you know, better technology than the early digital, you know, real cameras that we used to use, you know, 20 years ago. So that's changed things a lot too. So Thorne, maybe you could help me out which way you want to go here. It's been a while since I have been in North Texas, and you know, been looking for a job. So maybe you want to give me some direction there.
Sure. Could you just start off and tell us, like, you know, Associated Press, it's a great job for a photojournalist, but what did you have to do to get that job?
So when I came into the business, I was, you know, working newspapers, and I loved it. The Associated Press is, you know, hopefully everybody knows, is, you know, worldwide. We feed, you know, our images to newspapers, as well as now websites and TV stations, anybody that uses photos. So back then it used to be they wanted you to have 5 years, you know, experience working for a newspaper, you know, kind of know what you're doing, you know, be able to handle yourself in all situations. that's probably changed a little bit now. Sometimes I think they're looking for a little more experience, maybe sometimes a little less. It depends on what you can bring to the table. Now it seems like if you have that multi-platform talent, maybe it prepares you a little bit more. If you can do stills, you can do video, maybe know how to get a quote and things like that. You're expected to act, be able to more autonomously, know how to get your own credentials, know how to make your own travel plans, have a little bit of knowledge of your subject. Nobody's going to tell you, go here, be here, do that. It's like, go do the hurricane. I might get that direction, like say, go to the Port Arthur area, but nobody's going to tell you how to cover it per se. You need to kind of have that kind of knowledge in your head and in your arsenal.
So let me, I want to get to the whole multi-platform thing in a minute. Can we back up just for a second here and
sure.
talk about the experience of your internship? And, how important was your internship and your time at the Denton Record Chronicle and the Herald? How important was each of those stages to you, and what should students be thinking about when they look ahead at their internship and their first job?
No, those type things are very important. It's like, I can remember back when I was at North Texas, we'd go cover a football game or, an event on campus. And we would compare ourselves, it's like, oh, I got this picture, you got that picture. And, soon you realize we need to not be comparing ourselves to each other. I need to see what that photographer at the Dallas Morning News did. What did that photographer at the Denton Record Chronicle do? And then, because you want to bring your standards up to a professional level, because that's where you want to be. It's kind of like, like dress for the job you want. Like learn to take pictures or do video for the job you want. If you want to work for the Dallas Morning News or the Associated Press, you need to watch what they're doing and try to replicate what they're doing. And that's what I would encourage students to do.
Yeah, and I guess the internship, I mean, starting right out at the NT Daily, like, it's a little bit competitive even, like you're really trying to make sure that you don't get left behind by the other people who are working at the NT Daily. And then you don't want to be left behind by the people working for the Chronicle and the Dallas Morning News, the Associated Press. Always be looking out for what other people are doing and realizing that it's up to you to improve yourself. It sounds like that's what you're saying.
Exactly. You need to, hone in on your skills. And, like I've said before, sometimes you need to know how to take the picture, but you also know how to get in position to take the picture. You want to, to steal a line from the Hamilton play, you want to know how to be in the room where it happens. And sometimes that's very difficult. It's just like, trying to get onto a COVID unit ward. There's a lot of photographers that are capable of making those pictures, but can you talk your way into that hospital, into that unit to make pictures, where it's actually happening? And sometimes that's an extra skill that you can bring to the table.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds to me like you're not just talking about photography skills, but you're talking about basic journalism skills.
Yes. And those are very important. I think, to be honest, when I was a student, I probably discounted a lot of that, understanding AP style, understanding, headline writing, all those things. You need to listen to all that, learning how to chase a lead, how to cultivate, sources and things like that, because you're in it for the long haul, not just for the second. It's sometimes you meet somebody that may not be someone you need help from for a year or 2 years down the road, and you want to earn their trust, so down the road when there's maybe a difficult situation, they're going to trust you to come in and take that picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about it that way, because being a journalist is being a part of a community. And when you are at a small paper, of course, you're going to run into those people. But even at your level, you're going to see the same officials again and again over the years. So you have to make sure that
Yes,
you're a responsible part of that community.
absolutely. You know, and if you burn those bridges, you know, it can burn you, you know, so.
Does that translate also into how you are on social media?
Um, Personally, I stay off social media. I,
Mhm.
I don't want to get myself in trouble, you know, so I avoid it, to tell you the truth.
So you've talked about a little bit about the internships, and you talked a little bit about your education. What about the education that got at UNT regarding ethics? Has that been something that has been important for you, and how has your understanding of ethics changed over time?
Uh, I think ethics are important, you know, and that's something I was, you know, taught early on. You know, you see the photographers and other journalists you're around, you know, following good ethics, and it's it's a challenge right now. I think, you know, you learn that from your older journalists, and I think as some journalists are able to enter the field at earlier than say they might have in the past, because they do have these new skills of like video and social media. Um, Maybe they skip that a little bit, learning that from the veteran journalists. But it's important that it be taught, and I hope it's, you know, being hammered in, you know, at the university level, because it's something that you can't pass up. Because um, you know, what we're selling is our trust and our ethics. And if people don't, you know, believe you, they're not going to come to you for their news.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you know, that's what you're selling, I guess, you know, when you get down to it, is that you're trustworthy and reliable.
Mhm. And what are some of the ways that you could, as a photojournalist, undermine that trustworthiness, that sense of credibility?
Well, I think there's a number of ways. You know, one, if you manipulate your photos, you manipulate the situation. If you do do something that you said you wouldn't do, you know, like say you're granted access to a hospital, COVID units. They say you can come in, you can photograph the doctors, medical people, but please don't show the faces of any patients. Or you go to an immigration center, don't show the faces of any kids. And if you're granted that access and you show the faces of these kids, or you show the patients' faces, and sure, maybe you make a great picture, but that'll be the last day that you made a picture in that situation, because these people remember you. The hospital administrators, the immigration officials, these are the same people that you deal with next week and next year, and they're going to remember your name. And sometimes it's not just you that they remember your organization. No, we let the AP in, they didn't do the right thing. Or no, they abided by, you know, our guidelines, and, you know, we're going to let them in. So it's a little give and take on these things sometimes, but, you know, sometimes if you play by the rules and don't bend the rules too much, you're going to get continued access and build that confidence and relationship over time.
And you're also in a position where you hire photographers to contribute to the AP, and you know you're aware of what's happening around the industry. How much is a photographer's ethical reputation? How important is that to you in a hiring situation? And how do you see the sort of self-policing happening in the industry?
No, yeah, it's very important, because, you know, if I'm hiring somebody, if I'm hiring you, and I know you've got a good reputation, you do it right, I'm going to hire you. But if I know that, hey, you know, you've had that reputation of pushing the limit and taking advantage of situations, I'm not going to put myself, you know, out there for you, because if I hire you, you know, it's on me
Mm-hmm.
if you mess it up, or because, you know, I would be the one that hired you, and you're also representing the AP. So, you know, we're all trying to hold that high standard.
And is that something that you could even evaluate from looking at someone's portfolio? If someone says, I want to be a contributor to the AP, you may have even met them in person, but then you look at their portfolio and you see editorial work that's intermingled with, I don't know what we want, like artwork or, highly manipulated work. Is that going to give you pause? Do people need to be wary of how their editorial work is presented on a portfolio?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you can look at a portfolio, but it's hard to judge somebody solely by that.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of want to know their work and maybe have I think sometimes you hire photographers as much on their reputation and their work ethic as their portfolio. I've got a couple freelancers that are my go-to guys. One, I know they're going to do a good job. I know when I call them, they're going to be available. They're not going to go, well, I don't want to do that. I just want to do this. And I know they're going to do it right. And like you say, in an upstanding, ethical way.
Mm-hmm.
And once you've been burned, you're not going to go back to that guy. If somebody, that's the thing. You only sometimes have one shot at it. So you've got to maintain that standard.
And how does one build a reputation? Because if you're a student, and not many people know your work, how do you build a reputation in this industry?
Well, you stay steady. You do the right thing. That's a good question. I guess you get the chance. You just take your chances, and you just continue to do the right thing. It's just a slow. It's probably like a slow rise. You just take one step at a time. Each chance you get, you just have to do the right thing, be the right person. And I would also watch the social media, like we're saying. If anybody does look at that, you can be judged by that. So often it just takes that one comment or one post or repost, and then you can say, that's not me, that's not the way I am, but it's there. So I think you just have to be careful.
Right. And is there a role for mentorship in this industry? Reaching out to other photographers in a mentor capacity?
I think there is. Like I started working with a high school student. I don't know, it's been about 2 years ago. I worked with her senior year, and I saw her grow, but I also saw her, kind of grasp a whole different, look at the industry in a different, a different way. And she's actually now at the University of Texas, and she's a little frustrated because it's hard to jump off on your career when you're doing it from home on Zoom. But right. I hope she's taken some of those conversations that we had, not just about photography, but about the way to do photography, to heart, and hopefully that'll help her throughout her career.
All right, let's move on to how the industry's changed and how the things that you do are different. You mentioned earlier about being a multi-platform journalist.
Yes.
What do you mean by that? How are things different for you now than they used to be? And what is your sort of daily or weekly or monthly practice like?
So, I mean, technology has changed so fast. I mean, you would think I was 200 years old, but when I started, when I was in North Texas, we shot film, mostly black and white. And then I went to the Times Herald. We were shooting color chrome. And then when I went to the AP, they were still mostly black and white. They hadn't even made that jump to color. And back then, to go, say, shoot a football game, if you put out 2 or 3 black and white pictures, that was pretty much a standard day, but that's back then. You carried a dark room, or you would either use a dark room at like a newspaper in the town. Like if I went to Waco, I would use the Waco Tribune Herald facilities, and then it became digital, and then you could do it with your laptop. And back then they said, well, it'll just make things easier. But no, instead of 2 or 3 pitchers, they want 10 or 12. And so now at an NFL game between 2 photographers, we're producing like 200 to 300 pictures a game instead of, those like 2 or 3 black and white and a color picture, Back then they called the color picture a project, which it really was because, it took all that effort to do it in the dark room, and then it would take an hour to send it out to newspapers, and now you're sending out a color picture in seconds, sometimes right from your camera. So the expectation is a lot quicker. And now, they want not just the still images. You're at a hurricane. It's like, can you shoot some B-roll? They want the video. And then, occasionally it's even more video. And we've experimented with photographers doing, video, but now it's kind of backed off to where we just contribute mostly B-roll to our video journalists.
Right. So they're not asking you to do like story packages. They're just saying,
Not
from your location, can you get us some video so that we can work it into another package?
right now. That's kind of been the trend lately. And I've done, a lot of video packages, but they've kind of backed off on that. I guess there wasn't much of a market for that. It's the B-roll seems to be the flavor of the day, where we can add to someone else's package.
Right. But by the way, it was interesting for me to hear you talk about starting out, because I started off also working in a dark room and printing, and then having that black and white print that we would print at a sort of very non-contrasty print,
Yes.
so that it would increase contrast in the paper. I know that I hear myself telling those stories to students as well. And the point, I don't want students to look at us and say, well, I'm not a dinosaur, so that doesn't apply to me. Because I think the lesson is that, the rate of change is not slowing down. So whatever changes you and I have gone through, it's not like those changes are finished. I think the lesson to be learned is that, you have to constantly be adaptable to the way that technology and, the way we use it changes over time. So I don't want students to get the wrong message, like, oh, we're past all of that now, everything is easy. So you mentioned, shooting 200 or 300 pictures and going directly from your camera. Can you kind of describe that process? Like, what do you have to do to make that even possible? Because it sounds impossible
To produce that many pictures.
Yeah, and also just to send them while you're still shooting.
Okay, so the NFL is a different animal. So what we do, a typical NFL game will have 2 photographers on the field and an editor, on site. So the photographers are expected to shoot game action. They'll have a list of isolated action, and then a whole list of other things that we want to have. It's kind of like you're filling the daily need for action and the game coverage, and then you want the library wants these isolated actions for the other things. I guess like anybody else, we're trying to stay afloat. So we're still journalists, but we're also trying to make money on the side. So the photo resales, there's just this need for all these other images, so they have to shoot all those. And so,
and what are those images that you're talking about? I didn't quite follow.
They're isolated actions on players. They'll say, and some of them are very specific. Sometimes they'll say, we want horizontal action photos of X player with a clean background and very tight, waist up. So some, and you're trying to think, I need this picture of, whatever, the quarterback or something, this offensive lineman. And you're also trying to make sure you don't miss a touchdown or an interception or something like that. So it gets a little crazy sometimes, So.
Yeah.
So, but like I say, just to backtrack what we're saying, so maybe you don't have the skills of working in a dark room or follow focusing, because we have cameras with great autofocus. You have to bring a whole different set of skills to the table, trying to juggle, your field management of what you're shooting and where to be, when to be there. You have to have a really good understanding of the game or sport or event, whatever it is you're covering, whether could be politics. You know? So you just need to know what you're doing that day. You can't just show up and think it's going to happen.
And you said that you're transmitting directly from your camera. Can you just sort of describe that process?
Yeah. So like here it's baseball. The way it's working is I'm shooting. If I say there's a home plate play, I'll select a couple images. I can put a voice tag on it. You know, I can say, you know, I'll say Atlanta's number 13, you know, stole home, was tagged out by catcher number 2 for the Marlins in the 7th inning. And I will push that image, send that image, you know, via the internet to a, you know, folder that we've set up for an editor. Another photographer in New York has been editing my pictures. So he will receive like the 3 or 4 images I select, and he'll caption those, crop them, tone them, put it out on the wire, and then maybe the second, third best, he'll just put in the archives. And so we'll do that all through the game. That way, you know, you have pictures, you know, within just a few minutes of when it happened.
Are you voice tagging from your camera, or are you voice tagging from a mobile device that's tethered to your camera?
I'm voice tagging from the camera.
And what camera are you using?
Right now we're using Sony. We just switched to Sony's about 2 months ago.
Really? So like which one? The A7?
The A9 III.
A9.
Or A9, A9 II, A9 II.
Wait, is that a mirrorless camera?
Yes, yes.
Oh, wow. So that's a big change.
It's a very big change.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. And so and the voice tagging and what you're doing from the game, you're sending a small selection, and then later you're gonna send a much larger selection also off to an editor.
Right. Well, or I'll do it myself. You know, I can go back through and say, you know, I'll send these 30, 40 pictures into the archives.
Right. And that's from a laptop that you carry with you.
Correct.
And we're going to open up to student questions in just a minute, but I did want to mention that, you know, you're working in a team, and you're also working with a photo editor, which is something that a lot of students don't think about as a career path. What can you kind of describe what it is that makes someone a photo editor? What is the typical path that brings someone to that job?
You know, that's a good question, because I don't know. I think you would have to bring to the table a skill set similar to a photographer, but really have a good eye. You know, a really good editor is going to make the photographer look even better. Yeah. You know, there's certain people that I really enjoy when they edit my photos, because I think they're going to see what I'm seeing, and sometimes they see things in a different way that I didn't see. I've seen editors crop a picture that I shot, and I go, oh my gosh, you know, I didn't even shoot that, you know? So it is, again, you want somebody that you trust. It's going to know the picture that's, you know, you think is the right picture, and it's going to do it right. And so, like you say, you are working as a team. So the only information he's got, he might be sitting in his living room today, you know, so that voice tag is the information that he has to go with. So it's up to you to communicate that correctly.
Right.
And I've done that for other photographers as well.
Okay, so we're going to open it up to questions so we can just sort of loosen up the discussion a little bit. I do want to make a note that says we spend a lot of time talking about sports, but it's important to note that Eric has done amazing, really intimate work on the border. For example, he had some exclusive access during one of the most controversial periods of our border policy. He works in, like he says, in hospitals and courtrooms. He covers politics. He covers, you know, human interest stories. So he has a huge breadth that he can speak to. So he's not just a sports photographer, but so I just want to plant that in the minds of people out there. So ask any questions you want. So let's see what kind of questions are out there.
yeah, certainly I don't want to make it sound like I'm a sports photographer, because like I haven't shot a baseball game in a year. So, you know, I do a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Blake had sent me a question via email. I see Blake's on the call. Blake, would you like to ask your questions?
Yes, sure thing. Let me pull them up. I guess I just really had just one question. How did you get your start in photojournalism, and what was your very first job out of the Mayborn?
Well, the way I started was, well, I actually worked, I started in newspapers, actually throwing the newspaper, like in middle school. And then by high school, I worked in the newsroom as a copy clerk. And yeah, once I got to high school, I kind of started leaning towards photography. And then, of course, I had that access to the newspaper photographers in Waco, where I was living at the time. And so I got to shoot a little bit that way, occasionally got a picture in the paper. And then when I chose to come to North Texas, I started freelancing for the Denton Record Chronicle on Friday night, shooting high school football, and then occasionally, you know, other assignments. And so I guess my first job was working there in Denton. And then after Denton, you know, I did a couple internships, and it ended up at the Dallas Times-Herald.
Thank you.
You bet.
So Eric, a lot of people may not understand sort of the differences in the industry. You know, like you work as a wire photographer. Can you explain what it means to be a wire photographer and how that is similar or different to working at a newspaper, and how that is similar or different to working at a magazine, and how that's similar or different to being a freelancer?
Sure. So I would describe it as, like, if you work for a newspaper, so you work in Dallas and you shoot something, you're covering the event, but so often you localize things to your readership. If I'm covering something in Dallas, I want to, we're trying to put it in a perspective where everybody outside of Dallas can understand it and see it. So I guess your audience is, well, you're covering the same event, your audience is a little bit different. If I'm at a sporting event as an AP photographer in Dallas, covering, say, like the Dallas Cowboys and the New England Patriots, you know, the New England Patriots would, you know, typically be our audience, not the Dallas audience. I mean, you still cover the game, but you want to make sure you cover it in a more complete way. Where the Dallas Morning News might typically cover it from the Cowboys' perspective. So, like, if, say, the Cowboys lost a game, they might be more inclined to shoot, like, Tony Romo walking dejected off the field than, say, the New England Patriots celebrating. And as AP photographer, you try to have both, I think. As far as, like, working for a magazine, I haven't worked for a magazine, but I would guess there you have a lot more time to work on stories. If you're working on an immigration package, say, you may, instead of having, you know, a day or two to really press and get something out, you might have a few weeks to really cultivate what you're trying to do and show it in a more thorough way. Just like, you know, a writer, you know, instead of writing 500 words or 1,500 words, they're going to write, you know, a huge story, and you know, it's just going to be more in depth, and you could do that with your pictures. Is that kind of going where you want to go with it, Thorne?
Yeah, sure. I think it's also, you know, I guess we should talk about freelancers as well. And I guess, you know, you as a wire photographer, you have, like, job security to, you know, to the extent that anyone in this economy has job security. but on the other hand, you know, you don't have exactly the same latitude that a freelancer would have to choose your assignments, to decide that you want to switch off and work on a long-term project. Like you follow what the AP bosses, and you are one of those AP bosses. So I mean, you've gotten to a position where you have more choice than most. But I think that's another difference, is that, you know, you have the balance of job security versus sort of the freedom to choose what you get to cover.
Yes.
You're lucky that you work on a national stage, so you cover some great stories, and so
Yes.
you're always working on something, you know, interesting.
Well, I hope so, but not always. Yeah, as a freelancer, you know, you do have a lot of latitude as a freelancer, but, you know, like I had a friend that said, you know, as a freelancer, the one word you can never use is no, because if you do say no, sometimes that's going to be the last time, you know, you say no to that person. So, especially these days, because there's just not a lot of work out there. So I haven't really had to be a freelancer I mean, I have done freelance, but not, you know, as a sole way of, you know, supporting myself. You know, so I guess you're right. You do have get to pick and choose. I know a couple of AP photographers that have retired and then freelanced, and, you know, they said it is nice to be able to say no, I really don't want to do that today. But so you know, maybe you can say no, maybe you can. So it just depends on which way you want to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I had to move,
Yeah.
y'all. It's starting to rain.
You mentioned writing as well. Do you find yourself doing more writing than you did at the beginning of your career?
I don't, but, you know, I wish I was better at that. You know, of course, you know, I had to write. You know, you took all the writing classes in North Texas, but it's not a skill that I really honed in on. You know, I've seen photographers go in and be able to photograph a story and also write, you know, for themselves. And I certainly don't think I'm a writer at the level of, you know, what it would take to have an AP story. So, you know, my writing is kind of limited to captions, 2-sentence stories.
So apart from sports, what are some of the what are some of the types of assignments that you do that keep you going in this profession, that make you feel like, you know, that you love what you're doing? And I know you're a great sports photographer, and anybody can see that if they look at the AP Wire. But apart from the sports, what other sorts of work do you do that you find meaningful?
You know, I enjoy almost everything we do. I enjoy our border coverage, immigration coverage. I enjoy politics. I enjoy the stories. You know, sports, I don't really typically do a whole lot of sports, although I'm kind of on that track right now for a few weeks because of this baseball bubble. But I just enjoy the variety of our profession, you know, and not having to cover the same thing every day typically is what keeps me going. I enjoy meeting people. I enjoy doing stories. Just the challenge of making a picture. There's a lot of things that we do cover that aren't so enjoyable, you know, like shootings. If I never covered a mass shooting again, you know, I would probably be a really happy person. But at the same time, you know, you want to be able to tell those stories in a compassionate and respectful way, and I try to do that. I find the older I get, the more understanding and compassionate you are, and, you know, and if you kind of try to understand where your subjects are, not just get in people's face and just not always make the best picture, you know, it'll take you a little bit further sometimes.
How do you approach a situation where people are in distress? Because this is something that anyone, including an NT Daily photographer, including, if you work at the DRC, like you're gonna have to at one point work in a situation where people are in distress. So how do you manage yourself in those situations?
Yeah. It's not a, I wish I had a single answer for that. I just kind of go by feel. Some people, sometimes you just, set this down. You just kind of have a feel for it. I try to keep my distance. I try not to be obnoxious. You want to tell the story. Um, and so often things, you realize it needs to be seen and the story needs to be told, but you can also just try to be respectful of people. I love now that the Sonys that we're using, they're mirrorless, and so they don't make a lot of noise, which I
They're
think
quiet.
is gonna, they're totally quiet, and I think that's gonna make a big difference in our industry, especially if you're like in a church situation or a courtroom or things like that. It's just gonna make you more of a fly on the wall, and I wish I had that 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, the
But
only noise you might make is the cursing at the menu system.
yes, no doubt.
Sorry,
But
photographer inside joke there.
yeah. So, but I think if if you try to balance out telling the story and being respectful of people, um, and everybody's has a different opinion of how, what they feel the media's role is. I've covered the Columbine funeral, the whole shooting in Colorado, one of the first big mass shootings at schools, and we were doing the funerals. There was one church that they didn't want to let me in, but then a priest came and grabbed me and pulled me in a side door and said, "Stand here, shoot this. People need to see this." So there's a balance, taking advantage. Are you taking advantage of people, or are you sharing the news and saying this needs to be seen? And I think over time, the more you do it, you'll just kind of, find your equilibrium there, and find a balance on your coverage. But going back to ethics,
And
if you just try to do it in an ethical way, hopefully you're going to be more on the right side than the wrong side.
And how do you introduce yourself, and how much interaction do you have with people while you're shooting?
It just depends. If I can stay out of people's face and out of sight, out of mind, I try to do that. Sometimes if you're the only one there, you just, you say who you are, what you're doing, talk to them about trying to share their story. That's what your ultimate, job, your ultimate goal is to tell their story.
Mm-hmm. But you have to get people's names and things like that. Do you have a general rule for when you ask for a name and when you don't? Is there like a number of people, or how do you manage that at AP?
Yeah, we do try to have people's names. Usually, after I photograph somebody, I'll maybe tell somebody, "Hey, I made a nice picture of you, or I made a moment of you. Would you mind sharing your name?" And sometimes if there's like a whole bunch of photographers, or that have photographed the same person, maybe we'll just have like one person approach them.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Say, "Okay, once you go get that person's name, and I'll try to get this person's name," and then you share. That way you don't have 10 people saying, "What, can I get your name?" And you're just trying to be respectful of that person.
Mm-hmm. And I know you cover politics as well, so let me transition there. You go to a lot of political events, and from my own experience at political events, there's always some handler around there who's trying to usher you into the place that they want you to be.
Mm-hmm.
They've constructed backdrops for the politicians.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of image management that goes on at a political event. What do you think are your responsibilities as a journalist, and how do you balance what's right there in front of you versus, other more nuanced stories that also to be true?
Yeah, again, just knowing the story, what's going on. You shoot what's there, and you look for moments that aren't what they're trying. If you're aware of what they're trying to do, they want you to have their politician standing in front of this. I don't know, this truck or this tractor or whatever, or they want
this
you in
box
this
of
position.
donated goods. Yeah.
Yes, So shoot it, but just watch your surroundings, watch what they're doing, watch how they're reacting. Just always wait for those moments. That's what I'm always doing. When I traveled with George W. Bush in 2000, and his handlers would always say, "Oh my God, we've spent all this time trying to get you to, to do this, and then you make this moment." They would, it was always it's a give and take. It was kind of fun because we knew what they were trying to do, and they knew what we were trying to do. So it was almost a little bit of a game. So.
But you're also describing a level of political savvy that I think a lot of people don't really think about when they think of photographers. Like, you need to know something about the bigger story than just what's happening in front of you. So, let's say that, you have a politician who's been negotiating an aid package that's largely unsuccessful, and then they put you in front of that politician, handing out boxes of food. Like, is that something that you need to think about and balance the image versus what about the larger story?
Yeah, yes. The more about your story that you're covering, the more informed you can be with your photos. But, you still can say that it was a photo op, in your caption. You can say he handed these boxes off, but
Mm-hmm.
how long did he stay? Did he stay there for 5 minutes, or did he walk off and, did he hand out food in the food line for 2 hours? It's, I think those things kind of catch up with people if you pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's, just knowing your subject, what you're covering is important these days, instead of just being, guided by a handler. It'll make a difference in your photos.
Right. Yeah. So, and mediating that through captions is very, very important. Like, providing a context that maybe a viewer would not be able to get from the image alone, that you can provide in the caption, is one way of mediating image management.
I think so.
Yeah.
And not maybe just showing that moment, but showing, what else went on there, Did, shoot it tight, shoot it wide. What else did you do? What was the crowd like? You're just looking for your, pictures that would represent the way that you truly understand the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you're trying to be fair and honest, because that's what you're selling your integrity and your honesty.
Right. So, when in any of these situations, what kind of pictures do you think are, a lot of times we've all been there, where you shoot something and you're like, you come away with something that's usable, but you think, I'm going to forget that picture. What are the kind of pictures that you strive for, that you think are memorable, or that are especially useful to public discourse about issues in the news?
Well, I'll quote an editor, Harry Caplet. He once told me, there's only two kinds of pictures that you're going to make. He goes, there's good pictures, and you're going to make significant pictures. And he said, hopefully your significant pictures are good. So, that's maybe an oversimplification of it, But, sometimes you have a really good picture. You may have this great pass play or something, or you may have a funny moment with a politician, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the story. And you may have this, significant picture that's not very good. We all see those. It's a politician pointing a certain way or tripping or something. It's not really a good picture, but it was significant. So, I think just looking for those special moments are what really make make a picture good. You know, that when it's telling, you know, if you look at pictures that you really like, there's usually some emotion in the face, or there's something, if it's a certain type of action, or it's something that makes you have a reaction when you look at that picture. And when you have those type of pictures for important events, that's, I think, when it really becomes memorable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you mentioned, emotion, action, interaction with people. Putting those things. I like. Who's the editor that you mentioned? Is that Harry Kaplan? Is that what
Harry
you said?
Kaplan? Yeah, he's
Okay.
He's retired now. He lives in Austin. He
Kaplan.
was a photo editor that was at the AP when I got hired in Dallas.
All right, so we're going to open it up for the last little bit of questions here, and then we're going to wrap up. Let me look at the participant list. Karina, did you get any questions from the chat?
No more at this time, but it's open if we want to ask any more questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
Did you have any hesitation to pursuing your career path? And if you did, what was that extra push that made you pursue it?
Yeah, I probably did have some hesitation because it isn't what I originally had planned to do. When I was working as a copy clerk in high school, I was actually thinking about going to Baylor there in Waco. And there were actually some North Texas graduates that worked in the newsroom that I'd kind of befriended. And they said, hey, you know, you're actually pretty good at this. You should consider it. And they actually encouraged me to visit North Texas. And when I went up there to the, is it still the GAB? I guess y'all have moved now, but back in the GAB.
We're in Sycamore now.
I know, but the GAB building had just opened.
Yeah.
They had all these brand new dark rooms, and it was just all pristine. I was like, oh, this is awesome, you know. So I did. I went to North Texas that next semester, and kind of all took off from there. So. But they're you know, it's like anybody else in any career. You have your days. You wonder why, you know, you do what you do. But you know, when you're walking waist deep in flood water, you know, and it smells like sewage, you're thinking, why do I do this? You know, it's like, but you know, it's what we do, right?
So Camilo, I didn't want to cut you off. Did you have something else that you wanted to ask?
No, that's all for the moment. Thank you.
Okay. And I see Blake, you jumped back in there.
Just
Okay.
listen. I have nothing else. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, I'm gonna pass this back to Trent, but before I do, I would just want to say, you know, thank you so much, Eric. I know that this is you took some time out right in the middle of a busy work day, and we really appreciate that.
No, I'm happy to do it. And, you know, if anybody has any question or wants to ask anything, you know, I know I'm, you know, a long ways from being a student and things have changed. But anything I can do to help, I'm always glad to try to answer. So.
Eric, do you mind, or do you want to share your contact information at all with?
Sure. Yeah, I can give you my email. It's pretty easy. egay@ap.org.
That's one of the shortest emails that I know.
Yeah.
It's like a 10-character email.
Yeah. So.
Well, I really thank you for taking your time out in the middle of a busy workday, and we covered a lot of territory there, from your days as a student to the type of mentorship and the internships and the jobs that you took along the way. We talked about sports, we talked about politics, talked about human interest and working about people in distress, talked about technology. That's a lot, you know, so I really appreciate that. That's, you know, you have a wealth of experience, and you taking the time out to share that with us is really valuable for our students and for me. So thank you, Eric. I look forward to working with you again because
Yeah,
you're not,
call
you know,
anytime,
I'm gonna keep pestering you for years to come. So
please do.
we are forever connected at this point.
Okay.
I'm going to pass it back to Trent to close out the event. Eric, did you have anything you wanted to say before we go back to Trent?
No, just thanks for having me, and good luck to everybody, and just keep fighting the good fight, and give me a call or a text or email if you have any questions.
Thank you. Trent?
Okay, well, thanks, Eric. We appreciate it very, very much. And this is the first of several others mentor meetings that we're going to have with different leaders within the industry. So look for those from the folks at the J School, and be sure to sign up for those. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thank you, Trent.
Okay.
Thanks for your work in this.
No problem.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.